argue how well I support the data. And that's a fundamental difference in what we're asking you to do. I will also point out, I've been doing this for about 15 years, and when I first started doing it, for this very point of trying to get you to get our Odyssey classes to learn to listen beyond the data, to listen to how well supported an idea is. As we started this, there were at that point 4 teachers in class. We had a fine arts teacher, a foreign language teacher, an English teacher, and a social studies teacher. And we were all sitting around, and we said, okay, how are we going to get kids to begin to think critically about what they read and hear? And one of the other teachers said, well, Craig, just make up some bogus theory about history and you know, about Spain or something, and have them critique it. And so this came out of that. So you should know this entire thing is bogus. Bogus. It is made up out of my little brain, and ironically, if I had published it 15 years ago, I would be wealthy beyond belief now because it all seems to have come true. It's true. I mean, it is. I'm serious. All right. We were looking at Spain, and in particular, we were looking, and there's a little bit of a problem this year because you didn't get a chance to see the first part of the Michener tape, but I used a lot of Michener's tape in the Spain, the Land and the Legend. I used a lot of the history that he presented, plus other stuff from textbooks and later on some online stuff, that developed the historical lectures that went with the Spain unit. And as we were developing these historical lectures around Spain, I began to realize that Spain had gone through this very interesting process, most of which you've already got from the lectures, and which I'm going to go back into briefly. And it became the model for the theory. The theory is that all nations which become superpowers must go through 4 distinct stages. Now, I am not saying, so do not confuse what I'm saying here, I am not saying that all nations go through these 4 stages. I'm saying only those nations that actually become world superpowers will end up going through these 4 stages. But if they become a superpower, if a nation becomes a superpower, then it will have gone through the first 2 stages and will go through the next 2 stages as well. It just is true. It just happens. I don't know why. I have no rationale for why it happens. I just know in observation that it does. All right, the 4 stages. Number 1, a nation is oppressed by some outside source. Again, Spain was the model, and then when I started looking at other superpower nations throughout history, they kept falling in line. Spain had been overrun and occupied by the Moors through the whole period of reconquest. The Spanish people were struggling for their individual freedom, or struggling for their nation's freedom, their culture's freedom. They were resisting. Oh, I need to mention something here I forgot to mention. I will not intentionally make one of the errors of logic. I will try and do my best to support everything that I'm saying, and I will try to not make overgeneralizations. I will try to not make value judgments. I will try not to do correlations that don't exist, or cause and effect relationships that don't exist. And everything I tell you is based upon data that I believe to be actual. The best of my understanding is true. All right. So anyway, they're resisting the Moors. They are struggling, the whole reconquest thing, eventually ending in 1492 with Izzy and Bird and all of that stuff that we talked about. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. They kicked out the Moors and the Jews. Okay. I have this on I have a graph just to illustrate this. And on the graph, this is relative power. This is a timeline. And on this timeline, or through this timeline, I'm charting relative power for Spain, which is in black, the United States, which is in blue, China, which is in red, and Japan, which is in green. All right, so we're starting with Spain. Notice that until 1492, Spain was relatively weak. I am not suggesting it was totally weak, I'm saying relatively weak. And during that period of struggle, the people were willing to sacrifice greatly for the good of the nation, or in this case, the monarchy. At that point, once they, in 1492, got rid of the last of the Moors, it could have been that the people simply said, got rid of the pesky Moors, now let's, just kind of have a good, normal existence as a nation. And most nations will do that, and that's why they don't become superpowers. However, through either luck of the timing or the technology or whatever, in 1492, it also occurred that they did find the New World, Columbus. They did bring back all of this gold, and it led to that momentous decision to send the conquistadors to the New World to explore it and conquer it and to take control of it. And that allowed an outlet for the Spanish people to continue to sacrifice for the good of the state, to continue to sacrifice in a way that continued, this is the second stage, continued that push for power way beyond what most cultures are willing to do. And as they brought more and more gold back and gained more and more control of the North and South, much of North and all of Central and South America, the Spanish were thrust into this position as a superpower. It wasn't as if they said, let's go become a superpower. It was just, it suddenly was there. And Charles I, who we talked about, the first Habsburg, was absolutely the dominant ruler of the world. In Michener's film, the part that you didn't get to see, I can give you, it's a paraphrase, but it's pretty close to being a quote. Michener talked about the great kings at the time of Charles I. Henry II, Henry VIII of England, the most cunning, he refers to. Akbar of India, the most intelligent. Francis I of France, the most determined. And Charles I of Spain, he doesn't excel at anything. He just happens to be the ruler of the superpower of the world. I don't know how that happened. I don't think he knew either. Anyway, but as a result, they become a superpower. At that point, it's now inevitable. The rest of the process is inevitable. There will be some small defeat, and I will talk more about that in a second. And then after that small defeat, there will be some sort of a psychological shift within the culture as a whole, and the people will begin moving into what I refer to as the lifeboat stage. All right, so let's see how this worked out in Spain. We've already talked about the Reconquest, the conquistadors going to the New World, and then it's a superpower, and then Philip II is continuing that process, and he decides he's going to take over England and make Europe safe for Catholicism, and he sends the Armada to get rid of Elizabeth I and those pesky Protestants in England, and the Armada is sunk. Now, I know this was not a small defeat. I know that it was a massive number of ships that were sunk, and an enormous loss of life. However, relative to the actuality of the defeat, the people of Spain had no indication that this was the beginning and the end. There was no wailing. Well, certain the people that lost loved ones were sad, but there was no, oh, woe is me, Spain is a ruin, we might as well run for the. It wasn't like that. And in fact, Philip II literally commented, according to Michener again, I'm using Michener, commented that it was, yes, a devastating defeat, but he planned on building another armada. He just assumed they would rebuild the Navy and